with a record. Adjusted. Okay, good morning. We're in Vaetchanan after Tisha B'Av, and we're dealing at length with the Tefillah of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's interesting that the sources for Tefillah in the Talmud, in Masechet Brachot, usually it's learned from Tfilat Chana, from Shmuel Aleph Perek Bet, that we know that we read the Sefer Torah of Rosh Hashanah. We don't learn so much from Moshe's Tefillah. We don't learn at all, to say the truth. We don't learn a lot of Tefillah from Tfilat Moshe, even though it's a long Tefillah, it's a long begging, and it has all the sources of Tefillah. Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Shvach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, אתה החילות להראות את עבדך, את גודלך ואת ידך החזקה. He begs for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, אברנה ויראה את הארץ הטובה, and then he's mistalik. Merabo, as Aloha says, that that's a 3 stages that everybody stands through Shmoneh Esrei. Let's go.
But it makes sense. The answer to Chana's tefillah was yes, she had a son. The answer to Moshe's tefillah was no.
Okay, yeah, that's maybe the reason. You're right. It's מאוד חשוב to know that tefillah's answer doesn't have to be positive. So,
but I find Moshe's tefillah to be very encouraging. When I ask Hashem for something and I don't get it, I say, I don't feel so bad. Moshe didn't get everything he wanted. Why should I?
Right, and לפחות, at least from the educational point of view, I would expect Chazal to take it as a source of learning, but I can understand what you answered at the beginning, that tefillah, the simple tefillah, would prefer the tefillah of Hannah, which was answered totally on Tfilat Moshe, that was answered in a negative way. Anyway, let's go to the Midrash. Moshe says a lot of shvachim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael as well, and he says, Ki mi goy gadol, asher lo Elohim krovim elav, ka'Hashem Elokeinu b'chol korenu elav. So, have you found a nation that is so big as Am Yisrael, that has such a big God like HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And then the Midrash, even though it's a Midrash Halacha, sometimes, and as I said last week, I think that more in Sefer Dvarim than in any other Sefer we find, and it's clear because it's Sefer Mitzvot, so we find Halacha. What do you do with this? The Midrash asks, and then the Midrash brings like a small sugya and answer, and goes back to the Midrash. We saw something like this last week. And we'll see it throughout ספר דברים בכלל. So הלכה, אדם מישראל שהיה קורא את שמה, מהו שיהיה לו מותר להמתין אחר קריאת שמה ואחר כך יתפלל? Is there any necessity to daven 18 סמוך לקריאת שמה? Does it have to be immediately after? Or that you can make a hefsek? We know that in Megillah or in קריאת התורה there are a lot of hefsekim, how long you can be mafsik, etc. כך שענו חכמים. So the Midrash answers, 3 דחיפות הם. You have 3 necessities or סמיכויות. דחיפות is not necessity, is immediate things. תכף לשמיכה שחיטה. Once you're סומך on the korban, you have to shacht it. תכף לנטילת ידיים ברכה. So immediately after נטילת ידיים you have to say the bracha. And תכף לגאולה תפילה. So the Midrash doesn't answer it legamre because it's not an answer on Kriyat Shema, but it's clear that Geulat Israel is a Birkat Kriyat Shema, so you have to be soymechit to Tefillah. And we know that in Brachot, the Gemara discusses whether Hashkiveinu is a hefsek because it's after Gal Israel, so maybe it's an hefsek. The Gemara says that it's a Geula Harichta, it's a long Geula. Therefore, we can be mafsik in Ashkiveinu. So, תכף לגאולה תפילה. And מי שעושה כן, מהו מתן שכרו? So what are you given if you do that? אמר רבא בר אבאו, אם שמח ושחט, יהיה מובטח שקורבנו נתקבל. Okay, so just just to make sure that the korban is positive. So once you do it, יהיה מובטח שקורבנו נתקבל. I think that it means, what does it mean? That אם שמח ושחט, it's a סגולה that the Kohen won't make any failure, like שוחט חוץ לזמנו, or thinking about a wrong thing about the korban, as we know from the Mishnayos, that it can ruin the korban. So if he was soimech and then shoichet, he has an amen that it won't happen to you. ואם נטל ידיו וברך מיד, יהיה מובטח שלא יהיה שטן מקטרג בסעודתו. So סעודתו של אדם is not only to eat, to gain food. סעודתו של אדם meaning the whole familiar system that is based on the table, as we know from סעודת Shabbat. We're friends, we're family, and then sometimes Satan can be mekatreg, make problems between him and his wife, between him and his kids, between him and his friends. So אם נטל ידיים וברך מיד, זה לא יהיה כשטן מקטרג בסעודתו. That's one option. The other option relates to סעודת אדם, can relate to his money, to his prosperity. While we know that the שולחנו של אדם, the shulchan in Beit HaMikdash, is a matter of the kalkala, of the economics, and the shulchano shel Adam is the matter of economics. So might be that the Satan chas v'sholom can be mekatrek, and if Adam was noitel yadayim and then davens, so and then blesses, makes a blessing, so is not mekatrek. ואם קרא קריאת שמע ונתפלל מיד, יהיה מובטח שתפילתו נשמעת. So that's an הבטחה, a promise that his תפילה will be heard בקדוש ברוך הוא. אמר רבי יהודה ברבי סימון, את מוצא עבודת קרובים קרובה ורחוקה, והקדוש ברוך הוא רחוק וקרוב. So חס ושלום כאילו we find השוואה, we can equalize עבודת כוכבים to הקדוש ברוך הוא. How? כיצד עבודת כוכבים קרובה? עובד כוכבים, עושה עבודת כוכבים, ומעמידה בתוך ביתו, הרי קרוב. Okay, so if you put a pestle in your house, it's very close to you. ומניין שהיא רחוקה, and even though it can be so close, you know that any Christian has a lot of צלב in his house, and even though מניין שהיא רחוקה, שנאמר אף יצעק אליו ולא יענה, הרי רחוקה, so it doesn't have any meaning. ישעיהו מ"ו, I think it's a perek that he makes fun of all of the כוכבים. He describes how they call them the heavens, the earth, and they never answer. So once it's so, even though it's so close, it's so far. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the contrary,
most idol worshippers recognize that the idol is not God itself, but a representation of God.
Sorry, the idol is?
The pesel isn't God himself, but represents God. Just like the cross isn't Oto Aish, but it's a representative. Reminds him of Oto Aish. No.
So, okay, so the cross is not good. Maybe it's just a means. Okay, and
most idol worshippers don't view the idol as God himself. It's a representation of God, of one of the gods.
No, the simple people, that's what they believe.
What? The cross itself is a representation of God?
No, that the sun in the sky is a god.
Buddha is a god.
But the statue of Buddha is not Buddha.
Oh, if you talk to the Buddhists, they will think it is.
Oh, okay.
It's a question.
Especially when Buddha cries.
The Rambam says
when there's moisture dripping down from the statue, they think it's Buddha. It's from Buddha. I told you the story of where they saw there was a statue of Jesus and people ran over to look the water and they found out that there was a leak in the septic tank and that's what they were drinking.
Okay.
The Rambam in the beginning of Hilchot Avodah Zarah describes the failure of Avodat Kochavim exactly as you said, that most worshippers thought that even though it was just at the beginning a means in order to function and לתקשר, to communicate with God, even though it became the God itself. But you're right, basically, that it's not the same thing. The Midrash compares, okay? You're right. That עבודת כוכבים, even though that it's close, it's far away. ומילן שהיא רחוקה, שנאמר אף יצעק אליו ולא יענה, היא רחוקה. הקדוש ברוך הוא, the country is רחוק and קרוב. Far.
Did any Jews believe the Egel was a god?
Might be, yeah. Yeah, אלה אלוהיך ישראל. Yeah.
Something that took them out of Egypt that was just made right now? Were they stupid?
It's a question about the whole idea of the Avodah Zarah. Yeah, that's
I know, but
Chat is that it's mamash the God. Yeah,
born right now, and this took you out, mamish.
Well, Kusari says no. The Egel was not God, but a representation of God.
That's the idea. It's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to take the place of Moshe. Moshe was the intermediary. So this was the intermediary, but it's still called Avodah Zarah. It is Avodah Zarah.
Yeah. Any intermediary is Avodah Zarah, whether it was Moshe or the Egel or JC.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that the followers didn't think, or maybe the majority of them, that that's the mamash God. Moshe, and as you said, and you mentioned Kuzari, I'm not sure that they didn't think that the Kruvim in the Kodesh HaKodashim weren't God himself. Okay, yes, you can say himself. But, no, I don't know. But even though it's just a means, and they just represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't have any, even what the Midrash says here about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it doesn't relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, because we cannot know, touch, and think of. It talks about the representation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's say that you have a mezuzah, and you feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close. That's exactly what the Midrash says, that by feeling that, you're different than the Oved Kochavim that has a cross in his house, and even though doesn't feel anything. I mean, Be'emet doesn't feel anything. But as I said before, you're right that there is a difference. The Midrash doesn't deal with it. Midrash just wants to show either as God versus Avodah Zarah, or means of God versus means of Avodah Zarah, אמצעי. הקדוש ברוך הוא רחוק וקרוב, כיצד? אמר רבי יהודה ורבי סימון, מכאן ועד לרקיע מעלה 500 שנה, הרי רחוק. Yes, so the Gemara says it in several places in Sanhedrin, that 500 years there are between the distance between our עולם הזה and the רקיע, whatever it means, and even in that הקדוש ברוך הוא is so far, כן, וקרוב מניין, שהאדם עומד ומתפלל ומהרהר בתוך ליבו, וקרוב הקדוש ברוך הוא לשמוע את תפילתו, שנאמר שומע תפילה עדיך כל בשר יבואו. So even if you don't even pronounce it, you just think of it, you have the feeling that הקדוש ברוך הוא listens. It doesn't mean sometimes you daven and you really feel that הקדוש ברוך הוא is close to you, and לפחות from your own perspective you feel that הקדוש ברוך הוא listens, and that's why הקדוש ברוך הוא is better than the option. חס ושלום. אמר דוד לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ריבונו של עולם, כשיהיו אומות העולם באים להתפלל לפניך, אל תענה אותם שאין באים אצלך בלב שלם, אלא הולכים אצל עבודת כוכבים שלהם ואינה עונה אותם, ואין רואים צרתן צרה ובאים להן אצלך, אף אתה לא תענה אותם, שנאמר ישועו ואין מושיע על השם ולא נענה. It's very interesting. We know that תפילת שלמה, at the beginning of ספר מלכים א', when he erects בית המקדש, so he ממש specifically in his tefillah relates to אומות העולם, and שלמה המלך asks הקדוש ברוך הוא to listen, וגם אל הנוכרי אשר יבוא מארץ רחוקה, even to the Gentiles should הקדוש ברוך הוא listen. interesting that David HaMelech here in the Midrash says a country, and I think I gave a series of shiurim about the difference between David and Shlomo a year ago, and here you see mamash the clarity of the difference between them. David HaMelech is very Jewish, he's very, let's say, narrow-minded, Chalila, Chas v'shalom. Yes, he's just Jewish-centered, and he wants just the tefillah to be something Am Israeli, Jewish for us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close to us, and he pronounces strongly the difference between Umot HaOlam and Am Israel, and tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't listen to them, because they come to you lo belev shalem. They come to you just because of the necessity. Once they go to their idols and they don't answer them. While Shlomo HaMelech relates to the cosmopolitan HaKadosh Baruch Hu, cosmopolitan HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which has to be equal either to Am Yisrael or to the Gentile. So here you see the difference. Ma'u Yeshuo, so the Midrash deals with the pasuk that he brought from Tehillim, Yeshuo לעבודת כוכבים שלהם, וכשיבואו אצלך על השם ולא ענם. אבל כשישראל קוראים אצלך מיד שמע תפילתנו, שנאמר בקוראי ענני אלוקי צדקי. אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא, מה אמרת בקוראי ענני? You asked that I'll answer you once you just call me. עד שלא תחייך, עד שלא תקראני אני אענה לכם. I'll answer you even before, שנאמר טרם יקראו ואני אענה, שאין לי אומה אחרת אלא אתם. מניין ממה שקרינן בעניין, כי מי גוי גדול. So here you see the Midrash starts with the halacha of tefillah, says that you have to be soimech קריאת שמע in ברכות קריאת שמע to 18, and the Kadosh says that and now we can understand that קריאת שמע in 18 is ממש, קריאת שמע is הבעת אמון, זה להאמין, to believe in הקדוש ברוך הוא, to coronate him, to say that I just replied to you, not to any other option, חס ושלום, and then you have to be soimech to the tefillah, because מתוך this emunah, once you believe in me, and since is so basic that you believe in me, that you haven't called me out of necessity because you tried other options, no, you really believe in me, that's why I'll answer you. So now we can understand the techef, why we need the smichut of tefillah and the kriyat shema, and the Midrash goes to understand the Elokim Gadol Karov Elav relating to tefillah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is answers Am Yisrael even before they call, unlike Umot HaOlam that they call HaKadosh Baruch Hu once they failed with other options, and then he answered them, if he answered them later. Okay, let's go on. כתוב בתהילים, יענך השם ביום צרה. Okay? Famous פרק that we say every day. רבונן אמרי, למה הדבר דומה? לבן מלך שיצא לתרבות רעה. So the Ben Melech goes and is becoming a scoundrel, and והיו לו 3 פדגוגים. He had 3 educators. הראשון אמר, יעשה לו כבלים של 100 ליטרים. Okay, so we'll take, let's say, handcuffs or something like this, like very heavy that you'll feel it in his flesh each minute. It will be koev, and it hurt him, and then he repents. השני אומר, אינו יכול לעמוד בכבלים של 100 ליטרים, אלא יעשה לו כבלים של 12 ליטרים, so we'll take just an eighth of it. It's too much, 100, so 12 will be enough. בא השלישי ואמר, היאך הוא יכול לעמוד בכבלים של 12 ליטרים, so the third one is not even, doesn't even say what he thinks, but he just makes a tmiha. How is it possible that you can think of 12? יעשה לו כבלים של ליטרה אחת, so just 1% of the first one will give him. כך אמר משה, Moshe is very, he doesn't think, he's not a person of a sanegor. And we know that Moshe he's a person of din. He's not like Aaron. So he thinks, what he owes, and what he gets. So he says, יעשו לכבלים של 100 ליטרות, שנאמר, ומצאו רעות רבות וצרות. So the Midrash here understands that when Moshe says, how does it go? ומצאו רעות רבות וצרות, it's not just a תיאור, a description of reality, how it happens, but it's like a curse that חס ושלום, from my own perspective, says Moshe, thinks that Am Yisrael should be punished in רעות רבות וצרות. דוד המלך is the second dedicator, אמר יעשה לו כבלים של י"ב ליטרין, שנאמר יענך השם ביום צרה, not רעות רבות וצרות, יענך. And why did we say 100 and then 12? What's the relation between 100 and 12? So now we can understand כשם שהיום י"ב שעות. Okay, so היום י"ב שעות, meaning that it's 12. Why does Moshe say 100? I don't know, because Moshe doesn't speak about specific time. כיוון שעמד ירמיה, that's a third one, and usually we think that Yirmiyah is he doesn't have patience for Am Yisrael, and he gives them a lot of nevuot churban, but here we can see that the Midrash understands that Yirmiyah is much better than Moshe and David. כיוון שעמד ירמיה, אמר ריבונו של עולם, אין בהם כוח לסבול, כשם שאמר דוד ביום צרה, which means 12 hours, אלא יעשה להם כבלים של ליטרה אחת, שנאמר ועת צרה היא ליעקב וממנה יבשע. So et means 1 hour. Okay, I could understand that et even just like is 1 second. We know that from Bilam, that the Gemara says in Brachas that he knew the et of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to curse, and the Gemara says that it's just a participle of a second. But here is a Midrash understands that it means an hour. Okay, so here you say that et tzara le'Yaakov u'mimena yivashea. It's interesting that because the Midrash started with Yancha Hashem b'yom tzara, which is the middle posuk. We have 3 stages. We have 3 educators: Moshe, David, and Yirmiyah. And the Midrash starts with David's posuk, just uses it for the story. דבר אחר, יענך השם ביום צרה. What does it mean יום צרה? אמר ריש לקיש למה הדבר דומה? לאישה שישבה על המשבר לילד והייתה מצטערת לילד. אמרו, מי שענה את אמך, הוא יענה אותך. So you were born somehow because of your mother. So you have a tradition of giving birth in the family because your mother gave birth. So the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu that answered your mother, he would answer you. So you have nechama by knowing that you don't do a new thing, that it has a tradition. כך אמר דוד לישראל, מי שענה ליעקב הוא יענה איתכם. Why is יעקב? מה התפלל יעקב? ויעשה שם מזבח לקהל העונה אותי ביום צרתי. When Yaakov goes to Haran at the beginning of Vayetze, so he prays to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then when he comes back at Vayishlach, so he says, ויעשה שם מזבח את שכם לקהל העונה אותי ביום צרתי. אף אתה, סליחה, אף אתה יענך השם ביום צרה, ישגבך שם אלוקי יעקב. That's why David mentions יעקב. אמר משה לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ריבונו של עולם, כשתהיה רואה בניך בצער ואין מי שיבקש רחמים עליהם, מיד ענה אותם. אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא, משה חייך, בכל שעה שיקראו אותי אני אענה אותם, דכתיב כהשם אלוקינו בכל קוראנו אליו. So we have to equalize this midrash to the former one, because the former one said that Moshe Rabbeinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him that even before they call, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would answer. It's mamash like Na'aseh v'nishma. HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers before they even know what the details are. The same thing happening here. But here HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, not just when they call me, I'll answer them. It's madriga pchuta. It's not as it was there. Let's go further. דבר אחר, כהשם אלוקינו, זה שאמר הכתוב, ואני תפילתי לך השם את רצון, ענני ברוב חסדך אלוקים. רב חנינא בר פפא שאל לרב שמואל בר נחמן, מהו דכתיב ואני תפילתי לך השם את רצון? What does it mean את רצון? אמר לו, שערי תפילה פעמים פתוחים פעמים נעולים, אבל שערי תשובה לעולם פתוחים. So he learned from this pasuk that the pasuk doesn't stress the mile of tefillah, but on the contrary, the pasuk says that the mile of tefillah is inferior to the mile of tshuva, because you have et ratzon, as we saw in the former midrash. Et means time. Sometimes you daven and you can hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's heart כביכול will be open. But שערי תשובה לעולם פתוחים, you don't have to, once you make a tshuva, it's always good. We can learn it from Menashe. אמר לו מנין, דכתיב, the same דוד המלך says, נוראות בצדק תעננו אלוקינו ישענו, מבטח כל קצווי ארץ, וים רחוקים. מה המקווה הזה? מה המקווה הזה? פעמים פתוח, פעמים נעול, אף שערי תפילה פעמים פתוחים, פעמים נעולים, אבל הים הזה לעולם פתוח. So the word ים הקפיצה את בעל המדרש, yes, because the pshat is very easy. The pshat is קצווי ארץ and ים. We compare earth, yes, and sea, oceans, but the midrash understands that yam is בהקבלה to mikveh, because we know that mikveh shouldn't be of מים שאובים, and we know that the mikveh has to be 40 seah, while yam is as the din of Mayan, that it doesn't have to be 40 seah, even part of it is metaher. So the midrash says, mikveh, you have to be פעמים פתוח, פעמים נעול. I think that it means not that it's open from 7 in the morning to 10, but it means that sometimes it's not kosher. Sometimes you have to check out that it is 40 seah, that עשית השקה, that it's kosher. But with yam, once you see a sea, you can be toivel in it, and for sure it's always good. אף שערי תפילה פעמים פתוחים, פעמים נעולים, אבל הים הזה לעולם פתוח. Okay, so the midrash takes a very complicated pasuk from which he wants to discuss that in tshuva הקדוש ברוך הוא always exists. כך ידו של הקדוש ברוך הוא לעולם פתוחה לקבל שווים. Okay, המדרש in other places brings Menashe as a source of it, that even a bad king like Menashe, that was 55 years of big avodah zarah, big murders, etc. Even though in Divrei Yamim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened to him, and according to the Gemara, he was shav b'tshuva, and he was shav b'tshuva not because of good reasons. He tried, he was taken in captive by the Babylonians, and then they tortured him, and he called all the avodah zarah in the world. They didn't answer him, and then he called the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and even that Menashe was so rasha and called the Kadosh Baruch Hu just out of his distress, even though Kadosh Baruch Hu listened to him. But here the midrash brings from a pasuk that Kadosh Baruch Hu, the tshuva is much better than the tefillah. אמר, and again, כהשם אלוקינו בכל קוראינו אליו, כן? So השם אלוקינו בכל קוראינו אליו, according to the midrash, doesn't stress out the tefillah, but stresses out of the contrary, the tshuva, that unlike the tefillah, that you have to be mechav, and you can call the Kadosh Baruch Hu whenever you want, but it still has to be at ratzon. Tshuva, is not like this. אמר רבנן, אף שערי תפילה אינם ננעלים לעולם, שכתיב כהשם אלוקינו בכל קוראינו אליו, וכל הבנה זה פשט, זה פסוק, as we understood, related to תפילה, ואין קריאה אלא תפילה, כעניין שנאמר, והיה טרם יקראו ואני אענה. אמר רבי חייא רבא, כתיב, קווה אל השם חזק ויאמץ ליבך, וקווה אל השם, כן? So as we know in Chodesh Elul that is getting close, we say twice a day as a Perek Tehillim of this, and we always ask, why should we mention twice Kaveh Hashem, Chazak HaMitzvah, and then Kaveh Hashem? So the Midrash says, Heve mitpalel, וחוזר ומתפלל, ויש שעה שיתנו לך. So the Midrash doesn't understand that it's just twice, as most of the Darshanim say, that there is one stage before and something happens and then you do it again. The Midrash understands that it's a repetition, just it's written twice, but it can be 100 times. Just get used to repeat the tefillah and come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu each time in order that he'll come and answer you. דבר אחר, ואני תפילתי לך השם כל רצון, דוד, בשביל שהיה יחידי, אמר עת רצון. So the Midrash has a problem with the עת רצון, because according to Tanakama, so the עת רצון is clear. The עת רצון is in relation to tshuva, which is always. But according to Rabbanan, it says that even in tefillah, you get the עת רצון each time that you call. David, בשביל שהיה יחידי, he had the problem that he was singular, it was individual. That's what. But תפילתם של ציבור אינה חוזרת לעולם ריקם, ואומר, כהשם אלוקינו בכל קוראינו אליו. I think we'll finish. We have let's do another small thing and then we'll finish. מי גוי גדול אשר לא אלוקים קרובים אליו. שאלו המינים את רבי סמלי, כמה רשויות ברא את העולם? Okay, how many authorities created the world? אמר להם, אני ואתם נשאל לששת ימי בראשית. Let's be מעיין in the first פסוקים of the בריאה. אמרו לו, מכתיב בראשית ברא אלוה, בראשית ברא אלוהים כתיב. So the question here comes from that the word Elohim means plural, רבים. אמר להם, מכתיב בראו, ברא כתיב. ומי כתיב ויאמרו אלוקים עיר הגיעה, יקבעו המים, יהיו מאורות, ויאמר כתיב. Okay, so they don't have a problem with the Bereshit bara Elokim, okay, with the authority of Bereshit, as the Gemara in Megillah says that when they translated the Torah, they had a problem, but the minim here have a problem with the plural, so he answered them in each Maaseh Bereshit, it's כתיב just לשון יוכי. כיוון שהגיעו למעשה יום השישי, היו שמחים. אמרו לו, הרי כתיב נעשה אדם בצלמנו, as Rashi says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the Malachim, Pamanya Shel Mala, to discuss with them, so they didn't get the answer, and they asked him, it's written in plural, אמר להם, מי כתיב ויבראו את האדם בצלמיהם, אין כתיב אלא ויבראו את האדם בצלמו. So, it's from here it's clear that his answer was enough. They didn't discuss with the stirot between the first psukim and the other psukim, but they understood ויברא, it is enough. אמרו לו, והכתיב, כי מי גוי גדול אשר לא אלוהים קרובים אליו, so here you have problem. אמר להם, מי כתיב, כהשם אלוקינו, בכל קוראינו אליהם, בכל קוראינו אליו כתיב. So this midrash is very short, but it wants to show us that in each place that you have Chalila, being afraid of a kfira in the words, you have the solution, and the answer is in the words of the pasuk. You just have to find, and you have a clue where you find the individuality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then you have to do with a plural lashon and to be doirashit somehow. But it's very clear that all the psukim are in lashon yochid. Let's stop here. תודה רבה. And Shavua Tov.
Well, Elohim Krovim Elav could also refer to the multiple gods of the other nations.
Elohim Krovim Elav, right. Yeah. So Midrash understands it to the God, not to the nation. Yeah, right. Shkoyach.
Shabbat Tov.